Good evening, everyone. Firstly, we'll be displaying a QR code where you can add questions, which will be discussed during the book review session, post around in the Q&A session. So can we have the QR code? At the meantime, I'll request everyone to put your phone on silent mode. Also, kindly refrain from using the exit in the front. Try to use the exit in the back side. We have 4 exits in the second floor and the first floor. I would request everyone to settle down in the back. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharat Chandran. I'm the president of the Graduate Student Board of ISB. It is my distinct honor to stand before you today as we prepare to welcome a renowned economist, the prominent author and luminary in the world of finance. Dr. Raghuram Rajan was the 23rd governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He's a former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund and the Catherine Dusick Miller Distinguished Service Professor of Finance at Booth School, University of Chicago. His insights have not only shaped economic policies, but have also been instrumental in redefining the contours of economic discourse. Our chief guest today is a scholar whose intellectual adroitness knows no bounds. He steered the nation through economic landscapes with sagacity and vision. Moreover, his contribution to academia and literature have been nothing short of exceptional. Today, he'll be talking about his new book, Breaking the Mould, Reimagining India's Economic Future. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our chief guest for the day, Dr. Raghuram Rajan. Now I would like to introduce you all to Professor Bhagwan Chowdhry. Bhagwan Chowdhry is a professor of finance at the Indian School of Business and a research professor at UCLA Anderson, where he has held an appointment since 1988. He is the executive director of Digital Identity Research Initiative and the faculty director of iVenture at ISB. He is the author of FinTech for Billions. His global contributions include teaching at esteemed universities such as the University of Chicago and the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Professor Bhagwan Chowdhry. Now I would request Professor Bhagwan Chowdhry to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Many of you know that Raghu came to ISB when it was first conceived of and formed. In fact, Raghu and I co-taught a course to the first batch, very first batch in 2002 or 2003. Since then, Raghu has been coming to ISB often, and as I said last time as well, when I ask him, would you come and talk to the ISB community, he always says yes. So thank you, Raghu, very much.
Thank you. I have to mention the roles are a little reversed. I was in charge of staffing at ISB in the first set of finance courses, and I asked Bhagwan to come here to co-teach with me. And I'm so glad that he decided to move here permanently, but I had a small role in his being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So we are going to cut to the chase and go straight to questions. So Raghu, you released this book. His co-author is here, Rohit Lamba, and we are going to get him up during the Q&A because whatever questions Raghu cannot answer, Rohit can. So we will get him up here. So first things first. I read the book, and when I started reading it, I thought Raghu had switched parties and he had joined BJP because you say all kinds of good things.
Hey, I'm not in any party.
He's
so
not in
there's
any
nothing to
party, but
switch.
you know, okay. So for
I'm a
example,
neutral academic.
he's a neutral academic, okay. So I want to list a few things. In the book, you talk about there are some things that the government has done right. And you mention goods and services tax. Would you like to say a word or two about it?
No, look, I think what Rohit and I are trying to do with this book is to have a dialogue in which we sort of try as best as we can as to talk to the mainstream.
Yeah.
And the mainstream in this country is fairly convinced that things are going well. And what we want to say is, yes, they are going well.
Some things are good.
Some things are going well. But if we want to prepare for the future, we need to think about a lot of things that we need to do more, and also figure out where we are actually going off track,
Okay.
Including the things that are not going well. So in order to have that dialogue, we thought it's important to first enumerate the things that are going well.
Okay.
And, we think, for example, some of the reforms, the goods and services tax, the bankruptcy code,
Yeah.
those are good things. The infrastructure rollout, which is happening.
And you spend quite a bit of time talking about, I'll read something from your book which says, there is some sign that with the building of infrastructure, better roads and ports, and more efficient railway freight haulage, transportation logistics costs are coming down in India and getting nearer to global competitive levels. So that's pretty high praise.
That is, I'll tell you what we really believe is India's deficiency historically has been implementation, right? We give the anecdote in this book of a Indian minister going to Korea and asking the Korean minister, you guys have done so well. We were at the same per capita GDP in the 1960s, and now you're an OECD country. How did you manage it? You're so fantastic. And the Korean minister sort of points to a set of volumes on the shelf. And the Indian minister goes to it. The Korean minister says, it's all written down there, how we did it. So the Indian minister goes much closer, puts on his specs and looks at it and says, why? These are our 5-year plans. And the Korean minister says, yes, but we implemented them.
Yeah.
It's obviously, this was recounted to me by the Korean executive director at the IMF, but the point was simply that we have a lot of plans, we implement fewer of them. I think as far as infrastructure goes, the government has implemented its plans, most of them.
And I think I'm again quoting you. You say, government strength has been implementation, which I think is a high praise too. So a couple of other things you wrote about, direct benefit transfers. And some of you may know that Raghu had a role to play in that because when you were the governor, you and Nandan Nilekani conceived of UPI, which we all know how well it is doing.
So Nandan conceived it, I took credit.
No.
No, look, I think, success has many fathers, but clearly Nandan's design of the India stack and then the layering of UPI on it. We had some small role at the RBI to play in UPI, but it was largely conceived and designed by
He is
NPCI.
being modest because nothing happens in India unless RBI says, okay.
Yeah, well, let's put it, we wished for something which could do what UPI does. And a year later, UPI came, NPCI came and said, we've done it. Now all we need to do is roll it out, and that's how it worked.
Okay. One last thing before the honeymoon gets over. You say some good things about G20. You say something not so nice about G20, but you said that the fact that we call consensus on a very fractious issue is a pretty damn important thing.
Right. I think again, the G20 meetings were well implemented here.
Yeah.
Without snags. I think the fact that, I mean, every G20 meeting you spend days and days arguing over every comma, right? It's the actual statement of the G20. Actually, nobody reads it, but it becomes the basis for the next G20 meeting. So everything gets thrashed out, argued over, back and forth, back and forth. And the fact that in the previous G20 meetings, they couldn't get the countries to sign off. But this time they did, obviously with massive compromises.
Yeah.
But the fact that India could engineer that suggests that it had some influence in the process.
Yeah. But there's also a list of things that were not implemented. Like you mentioned smart cities. Smart cities are dead, right? Nothing happened in smart cities. Demonetization
Was implemented.
but was a disaster.
It was a...
So implementation, being good at implementation has both positive and negative sides.
I think that's part of what we're saying, that sometimes, you're looking for strong action, but it has to be thoughtful action also.
Yeah,
And if it's not well thought out, but it's strong, it can be problematic.
yeah. And you allowed it to happen.
Nope, I was gone.
You were gone, okay.
I was gone. We opposed demonetization, but
Okay, they didn't ask you. They asked you and you said no.
they asked me, I said no, but we didn't have a legal right as the central bank
Okay,
to say no.
okay,
So that is where it was.
okay. So now let's get to the substantive thing you spend a lot of time in your book about. You're saying these production-linked incentives are a bad thing.
Well, let me, that gets a lot of news because that's what the government is
Yeah.
doing. And everybody loves us to criticize the government because then they can write pages and pages about how we're wrong. So let's start with why we are saying we need to rethink where we're going, okay? And what we're saying is, if you think about the global supply chain, okay, and the best way to illustrate it is with Apple. Think about an Apple iPhone. The design and the content for the iPhone is done by Apple, the intellectual property. And actually, even the design is patented. The structure of the iPad or the structure of the iPhone is patented. All that stuff is done by Apple in Cupertino or in its various offices. So the Apple, if you look closely, it says designed in California. Why does it say that? Because it's not made in California. It's made by Foxconn. In fact, Apple stopped making anything in 2004. So it does none of the manufacturing. But it also does what is at the other end of the supply chain, closer to the consumer. So this is the conceptualization, then there's the manufacturing, then there's getting it to the consumer. On that end, it does the financing, the marketing, the selling. Think of those spectacular Apple stores. And it does the iTunes, it does the apps. Apps, huge generation because it gets, a commission for every app that's sold. Put it all together. If you look at the global supply chain for the iPhone, Apple owns both ends. And why am I putting my hands up? Because that's where all the value added is. So think of the smile curve, that's what they call it, value added on the y-axis, the chain sequence on the x-axis. The early parts are what Apple owns, and the later parts are what Apple owns. The valley of the smile is what Foxconn owns. That's the most competitive part of the manufacturing supply chain. Why? It used to be that, it was profitable. When you were competing with industrial countries, with their workers, you could make some profits there. Today, all the emerging markets are competing in that area. Vietnam is competing with China, is competing with Malaysia, and et cetera, et cetera. So as a result, any of the rents there have been competed down. So one way to see this is Apple's market value on a good day is $3 trillion. Foxconn's market value on a good day is $50 billion. There's a 64 difference between the two companies. So what we're saying is the following. Think about where you want to be going forward. Yes, if manufacturing comes, you have a competitive advantage, great. And that's why I like the infrastructure push. It's trying to make us more competitive broadly, but also in manufacturing. But if you have to subsidize the hell out of something, do you want to go compete for the lowest part of the supply chain or compete for the higher end of the supply chain? And what we're saying is the beauty about what India is doing, when you look around you, exactly where you are, Hyderabad, you find that India is competing at the higher end of the supply chain also. 20% of chip design is done in India, right? That's part of the higher part of the supply chain. All these global competitive capability centers, which we see, stacked around Hyderabad, they are employing people to do the value-added stuff, to do the design, to do the creative stuff, to do the software. So, Bhagwan, our question really is, why are we subsidizing manufacturing so heavily? Because the belief that we start low and move high doesn't apply. We are already there. Why do you need to capture this? So, in a sense, the logic behind the government subsidizing PLI with huge amounts.
And you're saying those subsidies are enormous. You say we're spending about $2 billion for 500 jobs. This is
5,000. But
5,000 jobs.
This is the Micron example, which is as egregious as it gets, right? We want to make chips, right? Like the rest of the world. The rest of the world wants to make chips. Why do we want to make chips? Feels good, right? Actually, there's a whole security.
That's not why we want to make chips.
No.
So I will, let me interrupt you.
Okay.
You also say there is no Indian chip firm like Qualcomm on NVIDIA. Okay. It would be nice, it would be spectacular, you say, to have a globally competitive national company. So my question is, isn't this calculation a bit short-sighted and say, okay, 2 billion for 5,000? How will we get one like this if we don't start?
But why do you want one?
Because I'll quote Elon Musk. Elon Musk says, people who are designing chips and people who are manufacturing need to be next to each other.
Not necessarily.
Okay, tell me why.
Absolutely wrong. NVIDIA is in the US. Its chips are manufactured by TSMC about as far from it as possible on this globe.
Okay.
12,000 miles away. Where is this? You have to be next to each other. You don't need to be next to each other. And NVIDIA has 2.5 times the market value of TSMC.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're saying only have NVIDIA and...
I'm not saying only have NVIDIA.
Okay.
I'm saying look at the Micron factory. You're spending $2 billion to get them to come here. You don't own it. It's a subsidy. It's not equity. It's a subsidy. They're spending 700 million. We're spending $2 billion to create 5,000 jobs for not logic chips. We're not talking H100 NVIDIA chips.
But in the short term.
We're talking really run-of-the-mill memory chips. Okay? Okay? You agree with that?
Yeah, but we have to start somewhere.
No, but again, you have to tell me why we have to start. I'm challenging this question, this point of we need to make stuff. It's manufacturing fetishism. If we can make stuff, we do make stuff. We do make two-wheelers, we make pharmaceuticals, we make a whole bunch of things where we have some advantage in.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm saying the world is subsidizing chips to an enormous extent, which is why we have to pay so much to get these guys here.
Yeah.
If everybody's jumping over the cliff, shouldn't we ask why are they jumping and why should we jump?
Okay.
So I'll tell you why I'm saying this. That $2 billion of subsidy is 1/3 the higher education budget of the central government. 1/3.
Yeah.
It's all the IIMs, IITs, TIFRs, etc. All that they get. This factory is eating up 1/3 of that.
Yeah.
It reflects a complete lack of sense of priorities.
Okay. I think that argument is a little specious. I'll tell you why.
Okay?
Because our constraint about IITs and Indian Institute of Sciences is not the money we can pour in.
Yeah.
It's the faculty, it's the talent.
Faculty
right?
is money.
Okay, all right.
I mean, faculty is money.
Okay,
Look at what China is doing. It's bringing back its high quality faculty from outside, saying we'll take care of your living conditions. That's what ISB is about. Would you have come back to go and work in JNU? I bet not.
JNU, maybe not.
I mean, we set up ISB precisely with this idea it would be comparable to the rest of the world because it would attract faculty from the rest of the world. To attract that faculty, you have to pay money. Don't tell me money is not at stake. It is at stake, fundamentally.
You
However,
can tell why we invite him to ISB all the time, okay? Good job.
look, you need to pay. You guys are paying, a very
No, they're not.
I would say you're paying the right amount to get people like him to teach you. But let me say one more thing. It's not that we can't afford a spectacular higher education system. 7.5 lakh students go abroad every year to get an education at the undergrad level. Now, I'm not in any way grudging the fact that they're going to get a good education outside. But if we had more universities of high quality, we could retain many of them. It would be, at the first step, import substitution. But at the second step, you would attract people around the world to come here and study, from the Middle East, from Africa, from East Asia. And you would generate an export industry because they would come here and pay you for an exchange. It would be an export industry.
Okay.
So, the bottom line I'm saying is, I don't see why chips should be privileged over universities.
Okay.
In fact, in the longer run, universities are going to get us much more than chips.
Okay, so we will get there. So I think if I can rephrase you, you're saying you're not against manufacturing, you're saying we don't need to subsidize manufacturing a great deal. Is that?
I will nuance it even more. I will accept the fact that for certain critical places where security is at stake, etc., you might want to subsidize that particular. But you need to make the case. It has to be the rarest of rare. I don't think we will be independent in high quality chips for a long time. For a long time.
Okay.
Right? And I think if we can be friendly with the rest of the world that is manufacturing chips and is likely to have a glut, we can actually buy them cheap. We don't need to be dependent on China for chips. We can be dependent on the US, Germany, Taiwan, all the countries that are making chips. If you want to become independent on chips, even China is finding after pouring hundreds of billions into it, that it's not independent because this new chip they came out with has used ASML machines. And you will see soon that there will be some reaction because you've used these machines and those machines you're not allowed to use beyond a certain point.
Yeah. But so you do say that we are not against manufacturing. We are not saying let's go to service instead of manufacturing. So I'll quote something. We'll say, does India need to choose between manufacturing and services? Both are highly intertwined today. But then you go on to say, but we still have to make choices on where we want to devote resources, in people or in things. My question is, and I'll put it delicately, why do we have to make that choice? Why can't I have a wife and a lover?
Because, because Bhagwan, you have a budget constraint. Right?
Okay, my wife is, I think I'm,
Yeah, just make sure you're allowed back home at night.
but I think it's also lobbying. So what my wife will do to me, I will call extreme form of lobbying. And that's why you have to choose one versus the other. Is that what we're saying?
No, I'm just saying, look, let's focus on the medium term, right? In order to get the medium term right, we have to focus on India's most important asset.
Yeah.
It's human capital.
Okay.
We have 1.4 billion people, more than any other country in the world. If we can train a large number of those people well, we have access to so much in terms of value creation.
Okay. So
And so I would say let's start with that, figure out what's going wrong there and fix it.
okay. I don't think anybody will disagree with you.
Yeah, everybody tells me this. We don't disagree with you, but we won't put the money there, we won't invest in this, we won't fix the problem of malnutrition. 35% of our kids suffer from malnutrition, right? And when I say this, I'm telling you, with the crowd that should be most concerned about it, are business people. They say, oh, we know about it. Well, if you know about it, why haven't we done anything about it? Well, we do something about it, but we haven't fixed the problem. Many countries have tackled it on a warlike situation and fixed the problem. I say this because we are fixated with becoming a developed, rich country by 2047. So I use this as an example to say, you must be joking about getting to be a developed, rich country by 2047 with 35% malnutrition today. Why? Because these kids are going to be 35% of your labor force in 2047, right?
Yeah.
20 years from now, those babies today will be entering the labor force. How do you expect to be a developed country when 35% of your labor force is mentally stunted, physically incapable, because there's, malnutrition does all sorts of things to your body and exposes you, to a lot of health conditions at that point.
Yeah.
So I want to say that if we want to get there, let's start doing our homework today. Don't say these are problems we know of, we know education is an issue, we know healthcare is an issue, we need to deal with it. Amartya Sen has been talking from the rooftops, but I think we need to make the case why this is important.
Yeah. So let me say a little bit. So human capital, I agree with you. I'm an academic. I believe in human capital. But here is the issue. Okay. Ashwini Vaishnaw has been, very critical, and you have always said to Ashwini Vaishnaw, show me the data, right? Show me the numbers, how you came up with this. I'm going to ask you the same question because I believe, I'll rephrase the famous saying, in Modi we trust, but everybody else has to bring data. Okay. No, but more seriously,
Yeah.
human capital. You're talking about doctors, nurses, lawyers.
Yeah.
We have 1.4 billion people.
Yeah.
How many of these jobs are you imagining?
Look, many more than we have now.
Many more.
Yeah.
But will we be able to find jobs where only
Okay.
doctors,
So-
lawyers,
so-
we need to...
So
how to
Bhagwan,
rule out
let
manufacturing?
me ask you this. You've been to a doctor recently in any big city here? You've obviously seen the large queue outside in a top-notch city. It's not like there's inadequate demand for medical services. You see the queue for guys who don't have medical certificates even, the barefoot doctor.
Show me the numbers. How many? How many of such jobs? You said, and I believe you, the number one thing here is jobs.
Yeah.
How many of such
So
jobs
the
are you going to
point is, you start educating people, right? Better,
Got it.
Okay? They don't all have to be doctors, they don't all have to be nurses, they don't all have to be. But over time, as you do all this, right, as the number one problem today is that the people, right, who are entrepreneurs and they're looking for workers, they keep complaining. This was a constant complaint. Now you're going to ask me for evidence. They say, where are the people who are trained for our work? We just can't find workers. In a country where there are a huge number of unemployed people, the manufacturers are saying, we can't find the workers. Now you ask me, what's the data on unemployment? Well,
What is the data on
CMI says 10% right now, and this is relative to historical levels of CMI data, this is high. The periodic labor force survey, we have terrible data on unemployment, terrible, which is why, BJP spokesman can say it's nothing, it's really low. But I think if you actually look around, you see massive evidence of underemployment, you see massive evidence of unemployment in the sense that 12 million people applying for 20,000 railway service jobs. That is
And
suggestive.
these guys are all educated. So let me talk about this human
Okay,
capital.
educated.
Human capital. Okay, the kind of education you want, I'm for it.
Right.
But Raghu, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight,
Yeah.
right? But in the meanwhile, we still need to employ
How many
people,
years
okay?
of this government have we had?
Okay, let's look forward.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, I'm saying we've had 10 years, and we could have started investing early on in fixing malnutrition. We could have started early on in fixing the...
We could have started 20 years ago.
Okay, today, no, absolutely. Right? What we say in the book is every single government has failed us on human capital.
Okay,
building.
this
Yeah.
is being, please send this, yeah. He's not saying just the current government.
Right, I'm saying we
All
have failed.
governments have failed.
On this,
Yeah.
right? Where we fall behind China is precisely on the quality of our human capital,
Right.
right?
So I agree, but
Right.
I think it will take time. I'm
No,
realistic.
it will take time, but we got to start today.
We got to start today.
Yeah,
I agree.
we got to start investing. So second, actually there are lots of jobs in creating human capital itself that we can start thinking of, right?
Such as?
So, for example, another thing we complement, the National Education Policy, which came out in 2020. Fine document. Some things we don't agree with, such as every teacher has to have B.Ed. We dispute that. That seems
Yeah.
rent-seeking by the teacher community.
And how long will it be before we implement any
Okay.
of this?
Yeah, but National Education Policy came out in 2020, has not really been implemented.
Yeah.
One important suggestion, we should be lots of jobs, right? And others, Abhijit Banerjee makes this. Actually, this is not Abhijit, this is Karthik. Karthik makes this suggestion. How about getting another worker in every Anganwadi? Anganwadis are where the kids, young kids, are essentially fed, that looks after the young mother and the child and attempt to improve their nutritional levels. The Anganwadi worker focuses on that. What if we got a mother of one of the kids, usually 10th class pass, maybe 12th class pass, to teach the kids basic alphabets, to play with them and teach them basic math? That's not beyond a 10th, 12th class pass. You could employ over 1 million, because there are over 1 million Anganwadis. As you said, everything in India gets multiplied very quickly.
Right.
You could employ 1 million today and make a huge difference. There are RCTs doing this, a huge difference in the quality of early child care. This is what they're trying to do in developed countries. We need to do more early child care. We could do it.
Okay.
And that would employ a lot of people,
Okay.
right? That's an example of how, so there are two things. How do we get jobs for the people we have? And as you said, not everybody is well trained, not everybody is well educated, but there are still lots of jobs that can be done by them. So in this case, the 10th class pass can teach kids. But the more important issue is, how do we train our people for the jobs they aspire to? They aspire to a lot, they're not trained for that. And that's the second aspect, how do you upgrade human capital? Even there, the state of Tamil Nadu that I work with is working on these kids who graduate. 50% of them, according to a survey, are unemployable because they simply don't have the skills for doing what they're supposed to do. We've worked with a bunch of firms to give them that last mile training. How do you up them from where they are to where they can actually work for you, right? Firms like Cogensis, etc. Those guys have come in and started training in a big way and have filled that last mile. We can do far more of that across the country.
Okay, all right. So now I'm going to do a slightly different role play, okay? I'm going to pretend like I'm PM Modi, okay?
Well, I mean, I have to be respectful to the Prime Minister of the country. So why don't you be somebody much lower?
No, so I want to call you back and say, come and help me. And I am convinced that manufacturing is what I want to develop. So give up your idea of service. I'm thinking about it. But tell me how to do manufacturing better. What would you tell?
I'm trying to convince him that he's wrong.
Okay, that was not your job. Your job is to tell me what I need to do to fix manufacturing. So in all the
That's Bhagwan
subsidies.
asking the question. That's Bhagwan asking the question.
Okay.
If Bhagwan is asking the question, how do I fix manufacturing, right? Or how do I move forward in manufacturing? One of the things you have to understand is, as far as commodity manufacturing goes, it's the most competitive area. We're really outclassed. Where we find India has done reasonably well is in sort of incremental engineered manufacturing. What do I mean by that?
Yeah, give an example.
Where the product needs tweaking, and you need skills in science, engineering to tweak it. Take our generic pharmaceuticals. The reason that became a spectacular success, including providing those AIDS, cocktail, which, Hamid Yusuf, whom we met for this book, described how he did that. But where they did really well is actually by weakening the patent law. In the early 70s, the patent law was weakened, saying the final compound was not protected. Let me say that. The final compound was not protected. The way of manufacturing that compound was protected. So all the Indian generic manufacturers made their way by finding a different way of generating the final compound. And therefore, they actually had a flourishing business, right? Because they didn't pay the royalties to those to the pharmaceutical companies, and Hamid built a business on that.
Yeah, we shamelessly copied and
Shameless, well,
which is okay. I think I'm all for
Copied process,
copying.
they-
Good ideas should be copied, right? Good.
I-
That's how humanity progresses.
innovated process, right? Innovated process, not the final compound.
Yeah.
Then came TRIPS, which basically said you can't do this anymore. And that's when pharmaceutical generic manufacturers became really commodity manufacturers. And that's when, a lot of the stuff went away to China. Another successful industry is the two-wheeler industry. Again, because there are design changes in each. But the point in all this is we haven't transcended to making a spectacular motorcycle of our own. They're good, they're decent, they've jugaad, there's some design, but, who do you see who would buy an Indian motorcycle, at the expense of buying a BMW or an Italian motorcycle?
But we could. We had hero cycles, you mentioned that, and because there was a big domestic market, that did well. So now,
Yeah.
why shouldn't we do the same thing with cell phones? There's a huge market for cell phones.
We can do it. Don't subsidize it. Make it.
Don't subsidize it,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not against manufacturing. We're not against manufacturing.
Okay, you guys heard that, okay? All right.
Yeah.
So don't ask him another question about, he's not against manufacturing. But let me go to this question about comparison with China.
Right.
You say the labor cost advantage no longer exists.
Right.
You write in the book. You also say the manufacturing bus has left. And I feel like the manufacturing bus may have left, but it has just seen a red light with the geopolitical
Yeah.
situation. So maybe we can catch up. So can you show me some numbers, and can you tell me, are the Indian wages not still lower than wages in China? After all, China per capita income is now 5 times that of
No,
India.
no. It has to be productivity adjusted, right? So
Okay.
wages in China are higher than India, but productivity adjusted. So there's this comparison. Send you the document. UPS did a comparison. How much does it cost to assemble a fan? This is lowest end manufacturing across a variety of countries, right? The old Asian model was that of a flying geese. You had Japan in front, Taiwan and Korea behind, and then the Malaysia, Thailand behind still, and China at the back, okay? And what that meant was Japan would go into the, would start first with textiles, etc., then leave that and go into higher end manufacturing, leave that, go into the highest end manufacturing. It was leading the pack, the others were following behind, right? So this was the flying geese model. The problem, however, is China is a really, really big goose. And China occupies a lot of space, even though it's there in the frontier industries now, it's also in textiles, because there still are a number of Chinese waiting to be employed from in the western provinces, still a number in agriculture.
And what are the wage numbers? Is there a differential or is there
There is a
not?
wage differential.
Between
China is deliberately,
China and India.
yeah, China is allowing its wages to also grow. But remember, China has a lot more capital per worker, has far better logistics. Put it all together, UBS says it costs the same to assemble that phone in China, Vietnam, India, and I think it was Malaysia.
And given that there are so many jobless in India, what are the real wages in India? I think they're still pretty low,
You see,
aren't they?
what we're saying is you cannot look at the number of unemployed in India and say these guys will push the wage down, because they're unemployable. And the number, that's why we're saying skill these guys up, then you will be able to essentially have cheaper workers.
Okay.
But so long as you have only a limited number of workers who can do the job, it doesn't matter that you have so many unemployed.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the issue of democracy and freedom and
You're Modi or you're...
I'm a chameleon.
Okay.
We like those values. I like those values. My question is, where is the evidence that democracy and freedom leads to growth? When I look at this huge success that China had, it had little to do with democracy and freedom.
It's not so much necessarily leads to growth. Actually, I'm willing to concede that certain kinds of manufacturing in the early stages can actually benefit from a more autocratic government, right? And, put China head to head with India. Today in India, you want to acquire land. It's really difficult because you get the democratic reaction, right? We've been stuck in this Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail, which was a grand showpiece project of this government, but it's been stuck because, to some extent, land acquisition has been difficult. On the other hand, China, over, maybe 10 years more than we have, has built out 30,000 kilometers worth of high-speed rail. That's because it's much easier acquiring land in China. You don't have a democratic opposition. You don't have politicians campaigning on the street against that. It can be done easily. Similarly, during the period of Chinese growth, they did keep wages below productivity growth. And one of the ways they managed to do that was putting a lid on union action. More recently, why have wages gone up? Because they've said, okay, it's time for us to consume more. We should allow wages to rise faster. So there is a switch that they control, much harder to control in a democracy. And if you look, at countries, Rohit has plotted this out, in development time and their democratization. It is true the US and the UK democratized, but pretty late in development time in the sense that they actually were quite rich before they had universal suffrage in today's dollars. India was democratic right from the beginning. And so arguably you could say, maybe India should have been more autocratic in the development process. Every East Asian country has been relatively autocratic earlier on, and then, like Korea, like Taiwan, become more democratic. But I would say...
Don't wish for it.
No. The problem with trolls is they take the first piece and don't listen to the second piece. The second piece is, where we are today, it makes no sense to go backwards, to be autocratic. Because if we are on the brink of this ideas, creativity, services revolution, the best sort of government for that is democratic. Now, you asked me what's the evidence. There's a whole bunch of historical studies we cite, which show the connection between creativity, between ideas, and freedom. And I think it's pretty clear how that would come about, but it's actually there in fairly rigorous studies that focus on causation.
And that's why these guys have all bought your book, which you're going to sign in about 20 minutes. But I'll take one last question, and then we will invite Rohit, and they can take Q&A from the audience. I want to talk about corruption. You say in your book, I think quite an insight, that even though China was authoritarian, at some level, I think the word you used was corruption was a lubricant, because at the level of the municipality, they were competing.
Yeah.
And that greased the wheels.
Well, what we say is another difference. So one difference between China and India is Chinese workers were much better educated. And Yashin Huang from MIT makes this point as to the big difference, why China's liberalization took off and took the role of manufacturing. But another difference that my colleague Chiang Tai-shek points out is that China's doing business numbers look pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
Doing business is a World Bank index which looks at how easy it's to do business. Doesn't look like it's easy doing business in China, yet it has this spectacular growth. And he argues the reason is every local government official basically is rewarded on growth and therefore tries to champion their local firms. And they do that by tailoring the rules and regulations to their firms. And, Indian businessmen always used to tell me the story, that, right? They go to a Chinese municipality, the mayor meets them at the airport, takes them to a room, says, here are all the documents you've got to sign. Once you sign them, you're in. It was so easy to start a factory there. How? Because they broke all the rules for the people that they wanted to break the rules for. The point, however, is that decentralization helped them grow because it allowed a tailoring of rules. Some of it was corruption, some of it was, I am incentivized to grow my province. But what kept them really honest, what kept this cronyism, you can call it local cronyism, what kept it from being detrimental is they had to compete with each other. So it became competitive cronyism. And that put some discipline, some efficiency into this process. So my sense is that was another advantage. But we argue in this book for much more decentralization in India, more for the idea of encouraging the creation of human capital. If you look at the places in India that have focused most on education and healthcare, they typically tend to be the decentralized places. And yes, there's a study on this also in the state of Uttar Pradesh.
That's why I need to buy the book.
But, take the state of Delhi, the Aam Aadmi Party, how it's focusing on building, these crates, which are its healthcare clinic, on cleaning up the schools, making them more attractive. I think for the first time, government schools beat the private schools in educational outcomes. So I think that one of the reasons for more decentralization in India is you can get more focus on healthcare and education because the people can see what they're getting and can complain very quickly if they're not getting the right thing.
Okay, so I would like to present an alternative. India also has corruption, and that has also greased our wheels. Our corruption has come in the form of favoring a few. I will not name them, but you all know who they are. But I would argue that that has worked. I mean, we have the cheapest cell phones, the cheapest data rates, It's because a few big houses were able to get that scale and make it work.
Yeah.
So yes, it is corruption, but perhaps that works too.
But be careful, because there are some places where scale helps, and, you know, you've sort of protected that area, and you've been fortunate that these guys have focused on efficiency. But you may sometimes not be so fortunate. We know that for a long time we were not so fortunate. That was called the license permit Raj.
Right.
So be careful about going back to the cronyism. You will soon find that you've encouraged a lot of creatures that you actually don't want dominating your landscape.
Okay, I will stop here, and there are questions from the audience. You have the QR code. Let's get Rohit on the stage, because Raghu cannot answer all the questions.
Rohit, what we will do is sit on one
No,
of
no,
these
no,
things.
no, no, no. I will go here and read the questions. Please come. No, no, please sit. You have the questions? You got it? No, 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 it's okay. I'll stand here and you're reading the questions?
I am. Actually, you'll be better.
No, no. You read the question, and if I don't understand it, I'll rephrase it.
All right. We'll do it like that. So, as it is, question is in the intonation, not in the words. So,
Sorry?
most of the question is in the intonation, not in the words. So, I'll try to read them as well as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, please, please. No, no, I prefer standing. Yeah, please sit.
Aren't you going to join?
Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, this is.
All right. No, no, please. Yeah. What's the question?
Well, professors, thank you. It's not every day that we are privy to a fireside between brilliant minds. So, please, a big, big round of applause. Thank you. Now, my phone has been exploding with questions. I'll try to pick the ones that have understood and club them together. So, from the smile curve, the bottom of the valley, many a question, and here's the first. NVIDIA started in 1993. They had everything in US. It is recently that they've outsourced. Why shouldn't India do it now? We need to learn tech before outsourcing.
So, what's the question?
The question is, NVIDIA started in 1993.
NVIDIA started in 1993.
And they had everything in the US. It's only recently that they have outsourced. So why shouldn't India do it now? We need to learn tech before outsourcing.
So the question is, NVIDIA also had to start somewhere. They started in the US, and when they learned, then they were able to outsource. Why don't we also learn it first, do it here, and then we can outsource it?
No question.
No question.
That's not a question.
There's an easy counterexample to that. Not counterexample, there's easy reason to
You're
that.
disagreeing with your co-author,
I mean,
right?
we disagree
Which is
often.
okay, which
Yeah,
is okay.
Is that 1/5 of chip design, according to various estimates, already happens in India. It just happens that we don't hold the intellectual property. So actually a lot of firms, and we met lots of people when we were actually in Bangalore, some people came to us saying, I'm working in chip design in Bangalore. So, and another interesting statistic is that about close to 40%, this is not hard data, but it's data that a lot of entrepreneurs have told us, of chip design is being done by people all across the world of Indian origin. So we're saying, yes, it may have been necessary in the 90s to do it, and I think it'll be great if we do everything from design all the way to fabrication to distribution in India, assembly in India, but it is not essential for one firm to do all of it from design to fabrication to assembly in-house. So if you get, and I think we should try to get rid of this rigid idea that somehow the only way to achieve value and scale is by going from bottom to the top. I think this is what Raghu and I were trying to say. If you already have 1/5 of chip design happening in India, our goal should really be to try to create firms that employ the existing talent that we have so the intellectual property is kept in India. And by all means, if these firms want to start fabricating chips in India, and because they're at the cutting edge, they actually are able to raise the capital to do it, that would be a win-win situation.
Okay,
Thank you.
next question.
Well, India has been resilient to global downturn till now. How long do you think the same can continue, considering US growth is expected to contract next year?
Look, I think we don't go into recessions because we start from a high level, but we can get growth slowdowns that we've had in the past. Global financial crisis, we had a growth slowdown. So there's no reason why it can't happen again.
So I have a couple of questions regarding that. You mentioned, for example, that stock market is at all-time high, but that's misleading because there is a fork. We are looking at the top firms, but the bottom firms are not doing as well, and that doesn't show up in the stock market.
No, so what I wanted to say is don't use the stock market as an indicator that all is well. And again, we're trying
Why
to,
not?
we're
Why
trying to tell people you need to fix the problem. See, Bhagwan, the problem is once you say all is well, these things get shoved under the carpet.
No, this is a different point. My point is, if stock market is showing evidence about a few firms which are large, and your claim is that the firms at the bottom are probably not doing as well, what indicator do we have that will give us that data?
Because they had much lower profitability.
Okay, but
The small and medium enterprises relative to the top. I mean, read the pieces by Sajid Chenoy, who's probably the most, the best economist working on India. And he looks at the data. And the data seem to suggest still that there is a K-shaped recovery. Now, why? It's because many of the small and medium firms also cater to the lower end of the spectrum. If you want to just look at big numbers, look at the output of two-wheelers. We still haven't recovered the pre-pandemic heights. Look at the output of four-wheelers. We're blazing new records. So again, and within the four-wheelers, it's not the cheap four-wheelers, it's the expensive ones. All that is suggestive that we do have a K-shaped recovery. Absolutely love the fact the stock market is doing wonderfully. It's also true of other countries. This is a global phenomenon. But let's be also careful that, there are people who still haven't recovered from the pandemic.
okay, it would be nice to actually have some kind of a market index, and maybe our finance scholars should come up with that, which also suggests what is happening, rather than just looking at this.
Actually, there we're really shooting in the dark because there is large amounts of anecdotal evidence. For example, the demonetization really broke the back of the information. And we're really playing in the dark. It's just like people keep making these statements. We just don't have enough data. And it is coming out in various ways, and we have to kind of put it together. But you're right. Like all these statements that we are making are on the basis of very few formal.
So I'm trying to create something called India Pulse at ISB by looking at some real-time data like power consumption and things like that.
Yeah.
We may be able to answer that. So
Yeah.
maybe even next year when you come, we may have
But
something.
Bhagwan, do try and capture the lower end with this.
Yeah.
Because every index that we have really captures the higher end.
Okay.
And rarely goes down into.
So I'll tell you what we are doing. We are trying to see production of brick kilns, which is basically local, and it will capture
That's
that.
a good idea. That's a great idea.
Okay.
You answered half a dozen questions just in that conversation. So, India has been resilient to global downturn till now, and I had about 15 questions from this. I hope we've answered all. So, banking plays a key role for any country's growth. Is Indian banking system ready, and is it in line with the developed countries to achieve the 5 trillion dream?
Okay, 5 trillion. I was hoping that thing won't come up today, but there you are. So 2 questions here.
Yeah.
First is, you started to clean up
Yeah.
the banking thing when you were the governor. Is it cleaned up now, or still a lot of work to do?
It's taken a long time, but I actually understand that it's now cleaned up.
Okay. And the second question was, the 5 trillion dream. It's only a dream about 2025. Eventually, we will get to 5
We will get
trillion.
there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
let's not worry about
We,
it. Who
we,
cares
need,
about
we
5
need,
trillion?
we need 13% growth to get there by 25, 20,
30% nominal or real?
real, to get there by 2025.
There's no way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because these numbers are pulled out of a hat and thrown around without, without even the basic math being done to see whether they make any sense.
Yeah, okay. So to get there by 2025, 5 trillion, we need to go at 13% real, add inflation to it, 18% nominal. It's not happening. Okay.
Yeah, I have an academic supporting.
I'm
doing
just
the basic
parroting
math.
it. I'm not supporting it. Yeah, I am. No.
You're
I'm-
doing the basic math.
take the
I'm
math.
supporting it. Yeah. Next question.
Sir, this is getting topical by the moment. India is set to bid for the 2036 Olympics. Is this a good decision economically?
Olympics are never a good decision economically for any country, period. Next question.
With the advent of AI, and for a country like ours, is it time to start the discourse on universal basic income once again?
Okay, so this is the question which is about. So you're not against all subsidies. In fact, you say clearly that we need to protect the people at the bottom. And in fact, you're in favor of direct transfers.
Yes.
Would you go as far as, I'm rephrasing the question, to have something like universal basic
Not,
income?
I think that what you want is income supports. I don't think you want to make it such that somebody can go off the reservation and live forever on public money.
Why not? What's wrong with it?
I just think what you want to do is help them get back into the mainstream, that there is a dignity to a job. There is a dignity to not be on the dole permanently.
And how would you, you're saying targeted?
I say target the poorest, give them money to invest in themselves, to invest in better nutrition, to invest in their kids, and they do that.
But are you not worried about that we'll have a army of bureaucrats who will be there to determine whether you're poor or not and take half the money away?
Yeah, so, Tamil Nadu has a bunch of exclusion criteria for these transfers, which seem a pretty reasonable place to start.
So you think the targeting can work?
You can do some targeting, where it's effective. You basically, with this kind of stuff, get about 60 or 70% of the population in that.
So why not do natural targeting and say, you will get this, but make it really hard to get it so that it's not worthwhile for me and Deepa or Swati to go and do it, but the poor person will go and
That's what
actually get it.
NREGA is, right? That's the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. You got to work, in the hot sun for a whole day for 100 rupees.
So what we say in the book at least is that, we discuss actually the amount if you were to actually do a national transfer, what was 1% of GDP mean in terms of literally per family and so on. But I think broadly what we try to say is that it's okay to, because there's a learning involved here as you're saying, that to start small and wide, like small in terms of the quantity and wide in terms of the breadth of which you're covering, and then slowly as you learn how easy or difficult it is to do, increase the amount and shrink the breadth of it.
Okay?
How long do you think the high interest rate situation is going to continue?
Right?
How long are the high interest rates going
Anything
to
I say doesn't move the markets.
Nothing I say moves markets either. But look, I think that I was a little surprised to hear Jerome Powell give a dovish sort of commentary to the markets, because he knows fully well markets start celebrating as soon as he does that, which makes it much harder to land the economy. So I, was under the impression that it would take much longer, but everybody thinks the Fed knows something. I'd love to know what it is that the Fed knows we don't know.
Are you willing to say something about our governor or no?
No, I don't talk
Okay.
about Indian monetary policy. That's neither in private nor in public.
Could you discuss how critical is the role of women in Indian economy and how can they be involved more? It's an open-ended question. I have about 6
That's an
seconds.
easy lob. That's it, okay, please go for it. What's the role of women?
So what we discuss, it's a very broad question. I'll tell you what we discuss in the book is that, we think along with obviously malnutrition, the biggest shame of the quality of growth in the Indian economy, not the quantity, is that it's simply not producing enough jobs for women. So whether it's, we discuss both the demand aspect and the supply aspect of it. Claudia Gondel, who won the Nobel Prize this year, she kind of is celebrated for this U-shaped curve, which is that initially, at the lower end of the growth kind of path, you do have a reasonable amount of women employed in the economy. And as you start growing a little bit, the first people to be pulled out of the labor force are the women. And then eventually, when you fix social norms, safety, and stuff like that, female labor force participation starts going up again. And arguably, India is at the lower end of the curve, and I don't know where the bottom is, and it's really worrying that we are not actually being able to climb up that curve even as we are growing. The easy fixes, the easy things to blame this, of course, are social norms and so on. So we quote this Dalit scholar, Chandrabhan Prasad ji in the book, where he says, tum log sab Ivy League colleges mein baith ke bolte rehte ho, female labor force participation has gone down. You come to my village, and the first thing the patriarchal household is proud of is that my wife and my daughter don't have to go to the Thakur's house to work. So this is the kind of, the going down the lower end of the U-shaped curve that Claudia Golden talked about. But what we also emphasize is that obviously we need to fix these social norms and they will evolve over time. But there's also the other side of how the economy is growing. So there's very good documented evidence that as the economy tries to claw its way back up from the curve, one of the sectors that generates a lot of jobs is textiles, apparel, leather, and so on. And India has kind of, we describe in the book, has hurt itself in the foot through our own policies and lost a lot of jobs that China is vacating to Vietnam, Bangladesh, and so on. And in the economic survey that we did with Arvind Subramanian, we actually showed in India also that for every rupee that you spend investment in textile and apparel, a large number of jobs historically have been created in India as well. The next issue, of course, is about safety. So safety is a huge issue, and lots of good research has been done recently by various scholars showing that, what China did, probably we can copy that, which is to build dorms for women close to where they're working. General urban safety is a big issue in terms of women getting to work. Accessibility of jobs is a big issue. Women pull out of labor force for the obvious reasons for childbirth, and there are not good enough systems in place actually as the joint family system is breaking to the nuclear family of how women can get help so that they can go back into the labor force. So there are many reasons, and we discussed these in the book actually.
So that I understand it, so you're saying that Claudia Golden shows that there's this curve,
Yep.
and we may be at the bottom, but there are some interventions that we can do that will put us in this thing. It has to do with safety, it has to do with bringing some of the, and you mentioned that in your book about these artisans, and
Right.
those things can be brought back,
Right.
and that will help.
And even services are typically relative to manufacturing, relative to hardcore manufacturing, services are more women friendly. And to the extent we can do more services from home, to the extent that we can split work, part-time work,
Flexibility.
Flexibility
and
is critical.
about that.
Right. So I think there's lots of scope for moving forward.
Accounting,
Yeah.
things like that.
But again, we have to recognize we're losing such a big part of our work, of our labor force, and we have to make interventions to actually bring them back.
Okay.
This is the last question, so a broad sweep, and I'll close with this. Some action-oriented batchmate has asked, what can the working youth today do to contribute to the Indian economy in a more efficient way? And finally, do you think India is going to be the leader in the coming decade?
What can the youth do? Number one.
Well, look, I would hope that everyone here thinks about, not just getting a job, but creating jobs, right? You guys can be the multiplier effect. Now, even, if you get a job and do it really well, you're creating a lot of value. But entrepreneurship is what one expects more and more from business schools like this. And I've already talked to some of you who are really interested in starting a new venture. So it does seem like if the, you know, I don't want to say the best business school because I'll get pilloried somewhere, but one of the top business schools in the country should just create so many more entrepreneurs in the country. It seems to me that's a way of getting on the development road.
Yeah, take big, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but you're the creme de la, of entrepreneurial brains in the country. Take big risks, let the other people do the safe stuff. And as far as one of the things we're really kind of keen about with this book is, which we find a little debilitating sometimes with especially the youth, is, I mean, including myself in it, is that please engage with ideas. Do not, if you disagree with Raghu or me, that's fine, but do not, as much as possible, don't question the intent of the person, even when you disagree with their idea. So I find that this is a very, very important thing for the youth in India, is to constantly engage with ideas rather than question intentions.
But to this extent, I mean, what we worry about is that we don't have debates in India. We just point fingers at each other. You are malintentioned, you are anti-national, and the other person is anti-national. You criticized this thing, therefore you can't possibly have the nation's interest at heart. I think that's a poor use of our mental faculties. It's what kids do in the playground. What you really need to think about is, so-and-so is saying something. Why do I disagree with it? And how can I convince them that they're wrong and I'm right? That's the way we actually have to have debates, not saying you're anti-national and you don't have, you're crooked, you're corrupt. But, it's precisely for this reason that we wrote chapter 13 in the book. Chapter 13 in the book takes on somebody who Bhagwan was pretending to be earlier. Actually, Bhagwan was doing the right thing, which is, challenge. And so we wanted to actually have that debate, even if it doesn't happen in public, that have somebody who challenges our ideas and says, what about this, what about that? We have a good somebody to follow for doing it this way. Mahatma Gandhi wrote Hind Swaraj as a question answer between him. He called himself the editor, and he asked the reader and the editor, and he had the whole book written that way. When we started this book, we thought, since this is a book attempting to persuade, shall we start doing this? Every sort of section starts with a question and a section is an answer. Our editor persuaded us that it was not a good idea. So the whole book is written in the normal way you'd have a book, but chapter 13 is written editor-reader, with a reader being somebody from the exact polar opposite perspective. Hopefully, if you're not convinced by what we said today, you'll at least read that and maybe get a little more conviction.
I took first year macro with Tom Sargent, and Tom used to say, don't critique my model. Give me a model to beat a model. So our hope is that there is a model, that we lay out in the first two sections of the book, and you can agree with the model or disagree with the model. And then in the third part of the book, we try to present the model as beating another model. So that was the idea of the third section of the book.
So, thank you, Raghu. Thank you, Rohit. I want to end with something you quoted in your book, which is that we have become very good at publicizing things. But you wrote something that I put it on Facebook today, that मेहनत इतनी खामोशी से करो कि सफलता शोर बचा दे. So on that, please give a big round of applause.
Now that Bhagwan, you have to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I have to say this. This was a line we loved, which was suggested by my wife. So she's a good Hindi scholar.
You should always give credit to your wife. It will do good things to you. Okay. So, because we don't like freebies, if you have bought the book, Rohit and Raghu are going to stay on the stage. Please come. They are going to sign this book. If you haven't bought the book, you're on your own. Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Raghu.
everyone that needs a book signed, please queue up on the right side.
From the right hand side. Anyone from the right hand side.
Professor Lamba se kara. Professor, thank you. Swati.
Sharat. Sharat.
Thank you.
One at a time so that we maintain it. One at a time so that we can discipline. Venkat ఉన్నాడు కదా వెంకట్ తీస్తాడు వెంకట్ తీస్తాడు quick I mean you can go and stand there quick కిషోర్ వెళ్ళిపో అక్కడ వెళ్ళి నిల్చో అక్కడ